sudden terror on Bourbon Street.
There were just bodies and the screams. You cannot think about, unhear that.
On New Year's Day, 2025, the celebrations had just finished, and you're hanging out with some of your buddies inside a small bar. Fireworks are still going on. It's been 3 hours since the New Year started. The muffled sound of streetcars and jeeps whiz through the thin walls, and you clear your way through the bargoers. You're walking outside. The architecture of New Orleans' French Quarter is stark against the classic American architecture of the city. Bourbon Street is completely packed with merrymakers. Everyone is having a great time. The golden light from the shops and disco fireworks shines down on everyone in the street, and pop music and dancing. You can't help but smile from ear to ear. That day, Shamsuddin Jabbar intentionally drove a pickup truck into a crowd of revelers on Bourbon Street in New Orleans' French Quarter. This resulted in the deaths of 14 people and injuries to many others. Following the initial impact, Jabbar reportedly exited the vehicle and engaged in a shootout with police, ultimately being killed in the exchange of gunfire. Investigation into the crime has revealed a few things. The suspect is a 42-year-old U.S. citizen. His name is Shamsuddin Jabbar. He was a devout Muslim who had fought for the U.S. Army in their operations in Afghanistan in their stand against Al-Qaeda. Investigation into his online activity had revealed something disturbing. He was an ISIS sympathizer. This, along with his online postings, suggested that this crime was politically motivated. The FBI classified the incident as an act of terrorism, citing his politics and motivations. As of now, the crime is still fresh. We have a limited amount of information that we can work with. However, authorities are currently collecting evidence and testimonies. His family has been shocked by what has happened. How could they not be? Supposedly, this is out of character for him. Shockingly. He had initially planned to kill his family, later deciding to capitalize on the New Year's crowd to commit his act of violence. Who could do such a thing? A monster, presumably. That is reasonable to assume that the only thing capable of this sort of crime must be subhuman filth. However, this doesn't seem to line up. His family considered him a smart and kind person. He had been a bit of a computer nerd, receiving a bachelor's degree in computer information systems from Georgia State University. He was introverted and quiet. He kept to himself in most situations. However, this made him feel like he had no community or identity outside of his computer skills. In 2009, he was deployed to fight in Afghanistan against the terror group known as Al-Qaeda. A part of him had been killed, replaced with a bile tearing through his being. His experience left him hollow spiritually and emotionally. Strangely enough, he seemed to love it. It had been one of the few times in his life where he had been surrounded by like-minded people who shared his goals. They were friends he had to rely on. It gave him a feeling of place and meaning. After the war, he had a hard time adjusting to civilian life. Financial and mental health struggles followed him unceasingly. Without his purpose or community, he was adrift, hoping between minor jobs and internships, eventually landing his place as a realtor and then as a senior solutions consultant at Deloitte. This made him erratic and violent. The bile burned through him, leaving nothing but desperation for the community. However, he wasn't a victim. He would often break out into violent bursts of aggression, often taking it out on his ex-wife. In secret, he was a monster, hiding it from the world, ashamed of who he was, and afraid of the consequences of showing his true self to others. He was bottling in his feelings, making them worse. Lashing at the one closest to him, he became a violent mess. However, he was smart. He knew people didn't like to hang around wife-beaters, so he became manipulative and entitled, hiding his true colors from those close to him. What happens when you take a mentally traumatized man and give him unrestricted internet access? Radicalization. The red pill, toxic masculinity, and the objectification of women as assets rather than people. The internet gave his rage a direction. He had found community and understanding online. He had taken up an identity as an ISIS sympathizer, posting pictures of him posing with ISIS flags and general ISIS paraphernalia on his Facebook account. It must be noted that Al-Qaeda was a rival group to ISIS. Thus, it might be possible that besides factors like financial stress and war trauma, mixed with a manipulative personality, led to him doing what he did. There is no excuse for what he had done on New Year's Day. However, it has to be understood that he was suffering from PTSD. PTSD is often mischaracterized as not being able to let go of a traumatic event. That isn't quite wrong, but it isn't entirely correct either. PTSD can manifest in many ways. Intrusive memories can rip their way into your mind at the slightest hint of a trigger or emotional reminder of the event, and it can cause avoidance, getting away from things that remind one of what happened, or a slow shift towards pessimism and depression. It can cause hypersensitivity. Something as simple as a door being slammed could cause a PTSD patient to go into a panic attack. And worst of all, this can combine with general self-destructive behavior, like substance abuse, reckless driving, and/or self-harm. These affect every second of these people's lives. Jabbar's wife had left him. His violent outbursts had grown too much for her to bear, and she had no better choice. The effects of the trauma had made it difficult for him to take things easy. He couldn't concentrate on anything the way he used to, and he would break out into violent fits at the slightest provocation or mistake. It had made him close to impossible to love anymore. Jabbar was lonely. He had no longer felt comfortable around anyone. Without his wife by his side, he didn't have emotional support, and no one he knew understood or related to any of what was going on in his mind. He was like an alien in human clothing, like the war had transmogrified him. This made him an easy mark for radicalization. Without a support system and people for him to ground his beliefs in reality, he fell into what is colloquially referred to as the manosphere and red pill. These ideas reassured him and appealed to his existing conservative beliefs. This was because the online extremist right is known for being highly polarizing, often blaming factors like women's autonomy, the government, immigration, and other hot-button debates as the cause for your problems. This blame it on others ideology appeals to many people because it takes the responsibility off of you to act right and puts it on others. It must be clarified that the internet often isn't the sole reason for someone's extreme radicalization. Of course, it's a catalyst. However, there's a reason most people on the internet are relatively unextreme. It's because the internet often only amplifies the feelings you already have and lets you develop your feelings on things you otherwise wouldn't think about. This can cause people with underlying issues to come to the internet and have their own beliefs mirrored back to them at such an intensity that it creates an echo chamber, which results in our own beliefs becoming more and more caricatured versions of themselves. What are Jabbar's beliefs? We know little about him. However, what we can gather is that from his life experience and his online posting, was he strongly influenced by military culture? This means a lot of things. However, speaking generally, the culture promoted in the military is what could be best described as a boys' club, glorifying guns and firearm culture, promoting many masculine ideals, and strongly valuing stoicism. None of this is wrong in moderation. These qualities can make people emotionally stronger and happier. Mild indulgence in gun culture can be a bit of good fun, and masculine stoicism can be great for mental health and confidence when we can achieve it. Despite this, there are negatives to these beliefs. The military and its interests result in beliefs that encourage people to dis-emphasize themselves as individuals in favor of teamwork. However, this results in dehumanization and blind faith in the military. Perfect for war because a good soldier does what they are told. Terrible outside of war because we need to think for ourselves. That is besides the issues within gun and masculine culture, such as gun violence and misuse and toxic masculinity, an often misunderstood term. Toxic masculinity isn't a revocation of masculinity as bad, rather it's a criticism of masculine ideals within certain contexts. Masculine ideals are great in circumstances like firefighting, fighting wars, police work, and so on. Ideals like stoicism, dominance, and aggression are ideal in some circumstances. However, in civilian life, they can make people difficult to be around because they can be hard to talk to and emotionally draining to be around. It must still be restated that this is a very generalized version of military culture. I am talking about it isn't true for every veteran because no group of people is a monolith. However, with the internet, the worst parts of these beliefs are likely to be amplified, resulting in the worst outcomes. However, what we need to remember is that the situation is still quite new, and we have a limited understanding of the motives, reasoning, or inner workings of Jabbar's mind. All that has been said about him is an educated guess as to why he did what he did. However, with all that, it might be easy to forget what happened. This man has killed 14 people, injured many more, planted multiple bombs, and gotten into firefights with police. Despite his trauma and circumstance, it was entirely his choice to believe the radicalizing beliefs on the internet, and it was his choice to externalize his pain and beliefs in an act of mass killing. The Bourbon Street tragedy is a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked extremism and the complexities of human behavior. While factors like PTSD and radicalization may have played a role, ultimately, Jabbar handles his actions. He killed those people. However, what happened that day shows how important it is to provide veterans and the mentally ill with sufficient support systems and monitoring. However, in this man's case, mental health was likely not the only thing that influenced him. Online radicalization and pre-existing beliefs and desires were likely also responsible. Because of this, if you have a veteran in your life, I recommend that you be patient with them and try to support them. And if possible, you should campaign for governments to provide better veterans benefits and better mental health care.